Okay, so Brian, thank you for coming onto the podcast.
Hey, thanks for having me on, Mark.
I'm surprised I haven't had you on since I came and joined the company
Yeah.
over here since January
So,
1st. Today's episode of Highest and Best, we want to discuss Prop 10, and we also want to discuss. So, if anyone has not listened, go back to the Ask Marc Anything show, which is episode number
170.
170, episode 170, and go back and listen to my thoughts on the Haas Institute briefing report. And so, Brian, we're going to kind of jump into both Prop 10 and this briefing report, get your opinion on it. I want your opinion and people to listen to your opinion on it because you deal with this on a day-to-day basis from a real estate analysis point of view. You deal with commercial investors and even residential investors of 1 to 4 units. But you come at it from a completely different perspective on how people can make a fair rate of return on their property and how they can also improve their wealth and overall financial well-being, right? So I really want to get your take on how Prop 10, rent control, and all this affects properties. So let's get right into now, did you have time to take a look at the report?
I did, yes. I did get a chance to look at it and, kind of get an understanding, try to put myself in the position of the authors and the point of view they were coming from. But I also was able to compare and contrast that to my own personal experience. As you said, not only as a real estate agent, real estate broker for the last 27 years, but also a property owner, somebody who actually owns apartment buildings, traded up from smaller to much larger, being able to see the perspective of what's happened over the last 27 years in the Bay Area. It's compare cities that have rent control versus cities that do not have rent control and the benefits between the two. And then more importantly, throughout my career, I've even had the opportunity to build ground up, not only as a condo developer, but also as an apartment building developer. So owning existing older apartment buildings and even being able to understand the cost and the endeavor of having to go through planning, building, and the motivations of why somebody would come at building a brand new apartment building, which of course speaks to and answers the whole problem of too little housing in the Bay Area, which is what causes rents to go up. And the very, very reason why the authors of Proposition 10 are even proposing more stronger rent control laws that would not only affect the existing housing stock, but would now even cross over and exist and affect brand new developments, which is the whole purpose of Costa-Hawkins, which is what
Yeah,
Prop 10 seeks to abolish.
yeah. One of the things I pointed out on yesterday's episode is the Haas Institute report claims that one of the people that are against rent control claim that rent control causes lower inventory, causes a lower supply of housing. And that's one of the biggest arguments against rent control. And so their argument states that, well, that's not true because in Oakland, San Francisco, and Berkeley, or sorry, Oakland, San Francisco, and San Jose, they've created the highest number of new developments after the year 2000. But that report goes to show why, and it's because of Costa-Hawkins. The
Yes.
reason why 43% of the entire housing stock is in those 3 cities with rent control is because of Costa-Hawkins. If Prop 10 passes and Costa-Hawkins gets repealed, now rent control applies to all that new construction. So what happens from a developer perspective if, well, actually, why don't you explain, number one, why developers want to build in Oakland, San Francisco, and San Jose when there's rent control? And then number two, what could potentially happen when or if Prop 10 passes?
So there's a couple of questions there. One, the primary question that you asked is why would this report go to show that the highest amount of high-class developments have taken place in cities like San Francisco or Berkeley that have rent control? And the primary reason, as you pointed out, behind that is because of the existing laws regarding rent control, specifically Costa-Hawkins, meaning it does not affect new buildings or buildings built after 1984. So a couple of things that rent control, to kind of go back to the whole idea of rent control, most of it evolved and started in cities that were first-tier cities where there was a lot of jobs moving in and therefore greater population, and the rents were beginning to skyrocket. And so when they imposed the rent control, originally designed to help the renters be able to stay there and not be forced out by the landlord just looking to raise rents, it also stopped. It also stopped. Uh, it also stopped new people moving in. Well, let me back up a bit. What it did encourage was that new developers could build brand new construction in areas where they could charge higher rent because these were the very areas that the jobs were taking place in. San Francisco, Oakland, Berkeley. Could we start over on that last part? I kind of tripped up on my thing.
Yeah.
We're not to the question. We get to why new development has been encouraged in areas that have rent control because those new developments wouldn't be affected by the rent control because they were built after 1984. And it just so happens that those newer developments also appeal to the audience of people or demographics of people who are coming in to those cities because of the higher paying jobs, which was the whole reason why rents were beginning to go up. What this current Proposition 10 seeks to do is abolish that so that new developments or anything that was built after 1984, including houses or condos, would also be affected by rent control. And in fact, the cities themselves would have the right to dictate to a developer how much rent they could charge or even decrease the rent if they wanted to, as we've seen in some cities, like in Richmond, where the rent control actually allowed the rent to be retracted 2 years back to when the rent control was first imposed because people were raising rents in anticipation of the rent control that was coming. And so this would stop development because from a developer standpoint, somebody who's looking in to decide, well, hey, is it worth it as a business proposition for me to build in a specific area? We're going to do a very, very precise calculation based on the acquisition of the land, our soft cost, our hard cost to build it, and how much income we could generate to determine if it's actually worth our while. Now, aside from just the developer standpoint and the capitalistic point of view of developing and building brand new apartments, which, by the way, answers the question of the housing shortage, the current rent control, as it stands, forces us as developers to work within the city's different guidelines, TDMs, like traffic demand management. So we're not just building willy-nilly without any concern for the infrastructure or the roads. So we have to contribute cost as part of our development cost to that. But more importantly, we also have to address questions about inclusionary zones. So as a developer, if I am going to build a certain number of units, different cities may allow me the permission to build more units depending upon the percentage that I allow for inclusionary or addressing the need for very low income, medium income, and how many of my existing units have to be or what percentage of my existing units have to accommodate those different classes before I'm allowed to go into market rent, which is what I'm really looking to do, is be able to have the motivation to go through all of these hard and soft costs and the time it takes to get city approvals or entitlements.
Now, a sample of these, or another name to call these would be below market rent units, right? BMRs.
BMRs, yes. The more common term for that would be BMRs, yes. And now this exercise of determining how many units have to be below market rate or inclusionary not only goes into new building for rental purposes, but new building for selling purposes. It also addresses the need for home ownership as well. Whereas if now suddenly as a developer, I have to make all of them inclusionary, and then I have to take into consideration the increasing cost of just payroll, the increasing cost of taxes or property taxes, the increasing cost of materials and building, then what I would then find myself in is a position where I'm really building at a cost where the moment that thing is built, I'm immediately losing money. So, of course, from a developer standpoint, without going through all of the crazy math that we go through to make a determination whether it's even worth our while to tie a property up or buy the land, let alone hire an architect, it almost stops development in its tracks, or at least the motivation for therefore. And because of this, it would probably slow down not only the amount of new rental housing market units going into the area, it would just create more of a demand, especially with more of a population wanting to move into California, which has been the historical outlook of California. You have a greater population moving in. A lot of people will refer to it as gentrification, because California, with all of its various types of jobs in the biotech, the high tech, the financial realms, it attracts higher income paying or higher income earning buyers and renters. Now, I can compare and contrast that to some of my apartment buildings that I might own in other parts of the country, like the Midwest, like Arkansas or Tennessee, where you have a very, very low amount of appreciation. They don't actually have rent control, but the job market and the quality of life is just not the same. So you have a very low appreciation rate, a very low increase of rental income. In case in point, I purchased an 86-unit apartment building 17 years ago for $1,900,000 in Tennessee.
1,000,009.
1,900,000 for
Wow.
86 units. I still own it today. It was 86 two-bedroom, two-story, 2.5-bath townhomes, right? Beautiful, brick. And I remember when I first bought it for $1,900,000, my rents were $450 a month. Now, 17 years later, the property is probably valued at $2,200,000. Okay, very, very low appreciation. And my rents have gone from $450 to maybe $525. In fact, I still have some tenants that are living there 17 years later paying $490.